Dust, Dynamite, and Destiny, the Untamed Saga of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The Wild West wasn't just a place, it was a way of life, a rugged, windswept land where men carved out their legends with grit, guts, and gunpowder. In the latter half of the 19th century, the untamed expanse of America's frontier birthed its fair share of outlaws, but few names ring louder in the annals of Western folklore than Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. These two enigmatic figures, together with their gang, the Wild Bunch, came to symbolize the twilight years of the outlaw era, a fleeting moment in history when the law was just a suggestion, and fortune favored the daring. In the crackling dust of remote saloons and under the blazing sun of canyon trails, these men danced with danger and outran destiny. This is their story, a wild, gritty biography of their exploits, their myths, and the truths that have slipped through the cracks of time like desert sand through calloused fingers. So saddle up, partner. We're about to ride into the heart of an era where the line between good and bad was as blurry as a mirage on the horizon. A boy named Robert Leroy Parker, the seed of rebellion. Before the world knew him as Butch Cassidy, he was Robert Leroy Parker, born in 1866 in the rugged terrain of Beaver, Utah. The eldest of 13 children in a Mormon family, young Robert grew up working the land. Life was harsh, but the boy's spirit burned brighter than the desert sun. His parents were devout, hard-working people, but Robert's curiosity and hunger for adventure made him a restless soul. By his teenage years, he was learning the cowboy trade, herding cattle, and fixing fences across the vast, untamed plains. But it wasn't long before the mundane life of ranch work began to chafe at him. Somewhere deep in his chest, the first sparks of rebellion were catching fire. The moment of ignition came when he crossed paths with Mike Cassidy, a rancher and part-time cattle rustler. Mike took the boy under his wing, teaching him the ways of the range, and the darker arts of taking what wasn't his. Out of respect for his mentor, Robert later adopted the name Cassidy, forever binding himself to the outlaw legacy. By the time Robert turned 18, he had his first run-in with the law after a small-time theft of a pair of jeans and a pie. It wasn't a grand heist, but it marked the start of a lifelong career of sticking it to the establishment. The law branded him a thief, but he saw himself as something else entirely, a Robin Hood for the rugged. Harry Longabaugh, the making of the Sundance Kid. Harry Alonzo Longabaugh, better known as the Sundance Kid, was born in Pennsylvania in 1867. Unlike Cassidy, Harry's beginnings were more modest than hardscrabble. Yet, he too was lured westward by the call of open plains and unbridled freedom. At just 15 years old, Harry left home to chase a cowboy's life, trading the comforts of home for the dusty trails of Montana and Wyoming. But Harry had a streak of bad luck, or maybe bad choices. In 1887, he was arrested in Sundance, Wyoming, for stealing a horse, saddle, and gun. After serving an 18-month sentence in jail, Harry emerged a changed man, taking the town's name as his own. Sundance wasn't just a place he'd been locked up, it became part of his identity, a badge of honor that hinted at both his resilience and his recklessness. Unlike Cassidy, Sundance was less about leadership and more about loyalty. He was the perfect wingman, sharp-eyed, quick on the draw, and fiercely dependable. Together, the two formed a partnership that would shake the West to its dusty core. The Wild Bunch, brotherhood in infamy. The Wild Bunch wasn't just a gang, it was a family of misfits and renegades bound by a shared disdain for authority. Alongside Cassidy and Sundance, the group included colorful characters like Elsie Lay, Harvey Kid Currier Logan, and Ben Kilpatrick, each man as wild and unpredictable as the land they roamed. Their hideouts, Hole in the Wall in Wyoming and Robber's Roost in Utah, became the stuff of legend, impenetrable fortresses where lawmen feared to tread. The gang's first major robbery was in 1896 when they hit a bank in Montpelier, Idaho. It wasn't just a heist, it was a declaration. The Wild Bunch had arrived, and their signature blend of precision, daring, and sheer audacity would set them apart from other outlaws of the era. For the next 6 years, the Wild Bunch ran roughshod over the West, robbing banks, trains, and payrolls with a panache that made them folk heroes to some and demons to others. Their infamous photo, taken at a studio in Fort Worth, Texas, cemented their legacy, showing a gang of sharp-dressed men grinning like they didn't have a care in the world. It was this duality, the ruthless criminals with a charm as smooth as polished leather, that made them legends. Dust clouds and dynamite, the train robbery era. If there was one thing Cassidy and Sundance excelled at, it was train robberies. These weren't the slapdash stick-ups of desperate men, they were masterful operations, planned with military precision. They'd study schedules, scout terrain, and even gather intelligence from inside sources. When the time came to strike, they moved like shadows, quick and efficient. In 1900, they pulled off one of their most infamous heists, the Union Pacific Overland Flyer near Tipton, Wyoming. With dynamite in hand, they blew the train's safe wide open, making off with over $50,000, a fortune in those days. The explosion was so powerful that pieces of the safe rained down like iron confetti, a testament to their motto, "If you're gonna do it big." A game of cat and mouse. As their exploits grew bolder, so did the efforts to bring them down. Pinkerton detectives, the bloodhounds of the law, were hot on their trail. Posters offering hefty rewards for their capture began plastering every saloon and sheriff's office from Colorado to Montana. But the wild bunch had a knack for slipping through the cracks. They'd vanish into the wilderness, leaving nothing but dust and frustration in their wake. Cassidy, ever the pragmatist, knew their luck wouldn't hold forever. The changing times were closing in on them. The West was being tamed, and the outlaw lifestyle was becoming unsustainable. In a bid to escape the tightening noose, Cassidy and Sundance fled to South America in 1901, accompanied by Etta Place, Sundance's enigmatic companion. South of the border, a new beginning. Life in South America offered a brief reprieve. The trio bought a ranch in Argentina, attempting to go straight and live off the land. But the outlaw life wasn't so easily left behind. Temptation, and perhaps necessity, drew them back into their old habits. Their final confirmed heist was a payroll robbery in Bolivia in 1908. The details of what followed are shrouded in mystery. Some say they were cornered by Bolivian soldiers in a hail of gunfire, ending their lives in a blaze of glory. Others believe they survived, living out their days under assumed identities. The truth remains as elusive as the men themselves. The myth and the man. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were more than outlaws, they were symbols of a dying era. As the West gave way to modernity, they stood as the last echoes of a world where freedom was absolute, and a man's reputation was his only currency. They were poets of the prairie, composing their legacy in the language of rebellion. Even now, their story continues to captivate. Historians, filmmakers, and dreamers alike are drawn to their tale, finding inspiration in their audacity and their unwavering commitment to living life on their own terms. Were they villains or heroes? Saints or sinners? The truth is, they were a bit of both, a contradiction as vast and wild as the frontier they once ruled. So, here's to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the last outlaws of the West. May their legend ride on, as untamed and enduring as the desert winds. The Castle Gate payroll robbery, a bold act of defiance. One of the most brazen and meticulously executed robberies in the storied career of Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch took place on April 21, 1897, in the small mining town of Castle Gate, Utah. Nestled in the rugged terrain of the Wasatch Plateau, Castle Gate was a company town built around coal mining, and its payroll shipments were a tantalizing prize for outlaws. For Cassidy, this job wasn't just about money, it was a calculated strike against the industrial titans who ruled over workers with an iron fist. The target was the Pleasant Valley Coal Company payroll, which amounted to a hefty $7,000 in cash, intended to pay hundreds of miners. The money was transported from a nearby train depot to the company office every payday, carried by the mine superintendent in a leather satchel. Cassidy, with his eye for detail, had scoped out the operation weeks in advance. The plan he devised was bold, clean, and efficient, carried out with the precision of a sharpshooter's aim. A lone ranger in broad daylight. Unlike many of the gang's operations, Cassidy chose to work solo for this heist, relying on his quick wits and charm to carry the day. Dressed as an unassuming cowhand, he blended seamlessly into the bustling town. The miners barely noticed him as he leaned casually against a post near the depot, hat pulled low, eyes scanning for the arrival of the payroll shipment. When the superintendent finally stepped off the train with the satchel in hand, Cassidy moved with the swiftness of a rattlesnake strike. He approached the man with a grin, casually greeting him like an old friend. Before the superintendent could react, Cassidy had drawn his revolver, the gleaming barrel pointing directly at the satchel. "Much obliged, partner," Cassidy drawled, his voice steady and calm. "Now, if you don't mind handing over that there bundle, we'll call this a friendly transaction." Caught off guard, the superintendent had no choice but to comply. Cassidy tipped his hat, his signature grin never faltering, and strolled out of town as calmly as if he were heading to a picnic. By the time anyone realized what had happened, he had vanished into the rugged hills surrounding Castle Gate. A daring escape. What made the Castle Gate robbery remarkable wasn't just Cassidy's audacity but his brilliant escape. He had carefully planned his getaway, stashing a series of fresh horses at intervals along his route through the unforgiving Utah wilderness. This leapfrogging strategy allowed him to stay ahead of any pursuers, changing mounts and leaving a trail so cold it was as if he disappeared into thin air. Cassidy used the natural features of the landscape to his advantage, navigating through narrow canyons, dense juniper groves, and treacherous rock formations that would have confounded even the most seasoned trackers. By the time the law organized a posse, Cassidy was already miles away, leaving nothing but hoofprints and speculation in his wake. The aftermath. The Castle Gate robbery cemented Cassidy's reputation as a criminal mastermind. Newspapers across the West lauded the heist's ingenuity, with some even painting Cassidy as a folk hero. Workers in Castle Gate, many of whom resented the coal company's harsh labor conditions, found themselves secretly cheering for the outlaw who had outwitted the establishment. But for the Pinkertons, the heist was another reminder of Cassidy's infuriating ability to elude capture. The payroll. The Wilcox Train Robbery, a symphony of chaos. If the Wild Bunch had a signature moment, it was the Wilcox Train Robbery on June 2, 1899, in Wyoming. This daring heist showcased their fearlessness, ingenuity, and willingness to dance with danger in a spectacle that would cement their legend in outlaw lore. The Union Pacific Overland Flyer was targeted because it carried cash, bonds, and valuables intended for bank vaults in Omaha. Cassidy orchestrated the operation like a maestro conducting a symphony, with every member of the gang playing their part in perfect harmony. The robbery began in the dark stillness of early morning, just as the train approached Wilcox Station. The ambush. The Wild Bunch had sabotaged a trestle bridge earlier that evening, forcing the train to stop at a remote location where the gang waited in ambush. Cassidy and Sundance, mounted on horseback, approached the train under cover of night, their shadows long in the moonlight. With revolvers drawn, they ordered the engineer and crew to uncouple the express car carrying the safe. Their next move was as dramatic as it was destructive. Cassidy had brought along enough dynamite to blow the hinges off Hell's Gates, as he liked to say. When the train's express guard refused to open the safe, Cassidy lit the fuse and stepped back, grinning as a deafening explosion tore the safe apart. The blast was so powerful that it shattered nearby windows and scattered bits of steel and money across the surrounding terrain. The gang quickly scooped up the loot, estimated at $50,000, and made their escape into the wilderness. But they hadn't counted on the loyalty of the Union Pacific's men. A telegraph operator, who had escaped undetected, sent out a frantic message, summoning lawmen and Pinkerton agents. The chase was on. The wild escape. Cassidy's brilliance as a tactician shone as the gang scattered, splitting into smaller groups to confuse their pursuers. Cassidy and Sundance, the best riders of the bunch, led the most aggressive posse on a wild chase through the rugged red desert. They crossed swollen rivers, navigated treacherous canyons, and used hidden trails known only to local cattle rustlers. Eventually, the lawmen gave up, their horses spent, and their tempers frayed. Cassidy and Sundance regrouped with the gang at Hole in the Wall, their Wyoming hideout, to divvy up the spoils and toast their success. The Wilcox robbery was hailed as a masterclass in outlaw daring, though it only intensified the hunt for the Wild Bunch. The Winnemucca Bank Robbery, swagger in the spotlight. Another unforgettable exploit came on September 19, 1900, when Cassidy and Sundance decided to hit the First National Bank of Winnemucca in Nevada. This wasn't just a robbery, It was a theatrical performance, carried out in broad daylight with a flair that left townsfolk talking for years. The plan in motion. Cassidy and Sundance strolled into town looking every bit the dashing cowboys, dusters flapping, spurs jingling, and revolvers holstered low on their hips. They had studied the town's layout for weeks, noting the bank's schedule, the sheriff's habits, and even the direction of the prevailing winds, which could carry news of their crime or their escape. Just after lunch, they entered the bank, casually greeting the teller as if they were there to make a deposit. Within seconds, the mood shifted. Sundance, ever the quiet and menacing presence, drew his Colt revolver and barked an order to the room, "Everybody hands high, or you'll be counting as stars in daylight." Cassidy, meanwhile, approached the vault with his trademark grin, coaxing the nervous manager to open it. The gang made off with $32,640 in gold coins, cash, and securities, all without firing a single shot. As they exited the bank, Cassidy tipped his hat to a young woman passing by, even pausing to help her retrieve a dropped handkerchief. It was the kind of audacious charm that made him a legend. The great getaway. Their escape was as slick as the robbery itself. The Wild Bunch had stationed fresh horses at intervals along their planned route, allowing them to stay ahead of the law. By the time a posse was formed, Cassidy and Sundance were already miles away, disappearing into the Nevada desert like ghosts. The Winnemucca robbery became one of the most infamous crimes of the era, earning the Wild Bunch a place on every wanted poster west of the Mississippi. For Cassidy and Sundance, it was just another day at the office, a testament to their unshakable confidence and unmatched skill. Legacy of defiance. The Wilcox Train Robbery and the Winnemucca Bank Robbery weren't just crimes, they were bold declarations of the Wild Bunch's defiance against a world that was closing in on them. Each heist added another layer to their myth, painting them as both villains and anti-heroes, rebels who thumbed their noses at the encroaching hand of progress. These events, full of danger, daring, and dash, remain enduring chapters in the saga of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Join the adventure with the Western echoes, Cowboy Tales Unleashed. If you're loving our cowboy stories and captivating tales, don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button to stay updated on all our future posts. Saddle up and ride along with us.